iDS Talks is a podcast dedicated to helping corporations and law firms find new and effective ways to leverage data, giving them a decisive advantage both in and out of the courtroom.
Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of iDS Talks. I'm Bobby Williams. I'm a director in the DEI Chair at iDS, and I happen to be joined today by my good friend Steffon Isaac, who is the founder and CEO of Clue Studio. We're all set to have a great convo about the role of perspective in success and the value of taking a step back to see the bigger picture. So Steffon, why don't you take a second to tell the good people about yourself?
Thanks, Bobby. I am Steffon Isaac. We design workshops and games and e-learning that helps teams to see themselves and to see each other more clearly by working on building their emotional intelligence and expanding their perspective.
Awesome, Steffon. Appreciate that. You all should know that Steffon is a leader in the industry in helping people build better professional spaces. And he has provided my team with guidance and just tremendous insight as we make our daily effort to improve our workplace. You would agree, Steffon, that like that journey never ends in trying to make the workplace a better place for all team members.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's something that I say all the time that this is not about a destination. It is about the continual process of reevaluating where you are and understanding the context that you're in. And because our contexts change all the time, we always have to keep updating our operating systems, the way that we see and understand the world. So it really doesn't stop. And like from a business perspective, you know that the industries that you're in, your clients sort of change, the regulatory environment changes, the market changes, and so you continually have to adapt to that.
I agree. And you used a key word for me, which is context. In addition to all the things you mentioned, the technology is constantly changing. And viewing everything through a comprehensive contextual lens is very important for us to be able to do the work we do. And I know we do different jobs, we have different careers, but I have found over the last couple of years in our many conversations that there is some overlap, significant overlap for me. For example, I am an investigator by trade, a digital forensics investigator, but I'm also a people leader in my organization. You investigate workplace relationships and you investigate workplace dynamics and trust dynamics, and you advise and provide insights to people leaders. So there's so much overlap there that you wouldn't on its face think that there would be. For me, I know perspective has been a super powerful tool. I do incredibly detailed work in these investigations, and it can cause anyone, even me, to lose sight of the bigger picture and maybe not get the full context of everything I'm looking at. I have learned through my experiences that seeing issues from other perspectives helps me listen. It helps me give counsel to my colleagues when they need it. And then looking at digital evidence from different perspectives, even it helps me see patterns and anomalies, and it helps us create a more comprehensive analysis landscape. And I wonder, even though your work is different, even though we have those overlaps, when you're on a project, how do you make sure you're stepping back so that you can gain the benefit of perspective and avoid getting lost in the details of all these different people and different organizations that you're always processing?
Yeah, I mean that's a really good question. I think my approach is one where I just try to make sure that I understand sort of three things. One is the people, and more often than not, I'm brought in by leaders. Leaders live and exist in a certain atmosphere in the organization. And understanding their perspective is one thing, but one of the things that I do is I talk to people across different levels of the organization. So, a perspective that is shared from leadership may not be a perspective that is shared by folks that are sort of closer to the ground. The other thing is to understand the processes that govern the organization. And so there are practices and protocols and sort of best practices for how teams execute the work. And they sort of provide the guide rails for how to operate. Understanding that sort of gives me a sense of what are the rules for executing. And the third piece is really understanding the culture. Culture trumps process every day of the week. And so looking at the people, the process, and culture allows me to have a view of a particular situation that incorporates um, the pieces that have the most influence on an organization's ability to sort of deliver on their strategy.
Now, obviously, you like weren't born with those perspectives, right? We learn over time, and we have experiences that inform and that we continue to learn. That sounds like a really comprehensive strategy, and it has a lot of baked in flexibility, right? That you need when you're dealing with different people, you're dealing with different cultures, and the real diverse array of dynamics that are born from all the different combinations that you get from different people, different industries, and different cultures. I wonder if, as you've been learning over the course of your career and life, have you had moments when a perspective from someone else has completely shifted the way you thought about either a particular issue or a direction you were taking on a project?
Yeah, I mean, I think about perspective probably more than I actually should. And perspective is sort of um, uh, a proxy for something very real, and that is how lenses bring into focus subjects that we are looking at. And before my life of running the Clue Studio, I was an amateur photographer. And in photography, you have a very visceral sense of perspective and why it matters. There is no way that you can have a full view of anything that you are looking at without multiple lenses. And that's one of the first things you sort of learn as a photographer is that you need more than one lens in order to bring into focus what you are looking at. And so before I sort of started to apply perspective in the context of work, I was playing with perspective in the context of real life and our ability to see how far we see. And, we sort of play with this every single day. The phones that we handle, that we use to capture photos. If you look at the phone that you have, there is more than one camera on the phone. There is more than one lens. And so in order to capture these beautiful scenes that kind of are that kind of chronicle our lives, we need to apply multiple lenses in order to sort of have that full view. And so I sort of brought that reality into the work that I do around helping teams see and understand themselves better. But to your question of moments when someone else's perspective kind of completely shift the way that I thought about a certain issue, I think, as I was saying earlier, leaders bring me into the organization and they present a certain problem that they are trying to solve. And when I start asking questions and I start to lead the atmosphere of the leaders at the top of the organization, and I go down and I start to talk to folks who are in the rank and file working on the ground, they have a different view of the problem specifically because they're working from a different vantage point. So this sort of question of moments where someone else's perspective completely changes the way that I thought about an issue. It happens all the time because in dealing with individuals, they are giving you their perspective, which is a combination of the contextual environment that they see and they understand. But our experience is our horizon, right? We can only see as far as our experience allows. In order to see beyond that, we need to bring in other lenses to expand that horizon.
Yeah, that example really resonates with me. I'm thinking about how when you not only does the camera have all these different lenses on it, right? So even if you're just like taking a picture of something, the camera brings like the power of all these different lenses to kind of amplify the resolution to give you like a higher quality photograph. But also I'm thinking about like when you want to take a picture of yourself or when you want to take a picture of the group of people that you're with, you have to use a different lens on your camera to do that. And the angle will be different if you take a selfie versus if you stop someone else to take a picture of a group of you. All of these are different angles. All of them are going to give different impacts and provide a different kind of like visual picture. And so you don't always know which one of those is going to be the best one. Right.
Right.
But you try all of these different things. And so it's all about incorporating these different perspectives. I think I'm going to use that example in the future because I never thought about it from that perspective. I'm usually thinking about like all the data that's being captured on mobile devices and how I can how I can extract that to get insights into the activities of people so I can learn about their behaviors to help resolve disputes. But just that little fact about just the perspectives of cameras, I'm going to keep that in mind.
Yeah. I mean, leaders have one of the most difficult tasks in business, and that is simultaneously having a mountaintop view while also keeping the on the ground view in focus at the same time. That is an incredibly difficult feat to um, accomplish and to balance. I remember the first time that I went to Yosemite and you drive into the park, I didn't realize that you actually enter Yosemite from the top of the mountain
Mm.
and then you hike down to the valley. And when I drove in, I had a certain view of Yosemite that I thought was beautiful, but I was like, there should be more than this. And it was kind of an object lesson in that the view is always there. You just can't see it depending on where you're standing. And so once you get into Yosemite and you're sort of, taken back by how beautiful it is, then another journey starts where you hike down into the valley and then you begin to see a side of Yosemite that wasn't apparent to you when you were standing at the mountaintop. And I think we need to become more fluid in transitioning our lenses to see the expansive mountaintop view and also the view of what it's like on the ground. Both provide incredible information about the context, but that information is also very different.
Yeah. In improv, we do this thing called not going A to B, like in word association, but A to C. So to give you a little insight to my thought process, you talked about going into Yosemite and being on the top of the mountain. That made me think about falling because I don't do so great with heights. But that made me think about gravity, right? That was my A to C. And something that I used to say even back in college is that gravity is a fact of life, but gravity's impact on you is completely about perspective. Gravity's impact on you is about where you are. Like gravity, if you're on the Earth's crust, might be different if you're, at the core of the Earth. Gravity on Earth is different than if you're on the moon, right? Gravity's still a thing, it still exists. But, gravity is different from either of those places if you're right outside of a black hole, right? So gravity is like this scientific phenomenon that's always true and always a fact, but our perspective has an impact on how it affects us. It has an impact on what our experience is, even in those facts. So sometimes perspective is important, not even just for understanding facts, but it's also important for informing your own experience and informing the experiences of others. I think that's what empathy is all about, right?
Yeah.
Understanding like how certain things impact us and impact other people, you know?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think training perspective onto yourself is one of the first steps in building one's emotional intelligence to becoming more self-aware, to understand what your triggers are, what your patterns are, what is your default state of being. And that should happen before you start applying lenses outside of yourself. So it is tremendously important.
So you've talked a lot about like working with different companies to working with leaders and I'm sure some of those companies have been large and small. So you've had different industries, different sizes. I know when I'm trying to relay insights to people, I want them to walk away with more than just concepts. I want to try to give them practical things that they can apply. So if you can, are there like 2 to 3 practical things that team members can do to try to focus on having like a big picture mindset to kind of fake big picture, even when they're working in details?
Yeah. I think there's a prerequisite to having the kind of reality that you're describing. And so the first step that I would say is to work on trust and safety in the team. Team members that are working together, that are stretching themselves for goals and stretching themselves to sort of meet deliverables, need to know the boundaries of their team members that they're working with. They need to know what each person on the team needs in order to be safe, feel a sense of safety, to contribute, to lean in, to give an idea that may not be completely whole, but may bring and advance the conversation forward just a little bit. And safety and understanding who you're working shoulder to shoulder with is a prerequisite for high level execution. So I would say one is knowing the boundaries of your teammates and understanding their why. We are doing this because work is a way for us to have a sense of means so we can live our lives. But the reason we do this is for family, it's for these deeper, more grounding aspects. And so understanding what drives your coworkers and your colleagues, I think creates the foundation for um, having the freedom to share and to contribute and to have a mindset that maybe is a little broader than what is acceptable at the organization. The second is working to sort of foster a culture of permission. And so in a lot of teams, there can be hesitation to challenge assumptions, to be seen as not having a fully formed idea, to question things. And so, do you have a culture where individuals can pause, can interrupt, can challenge in a way that advances the conversation? And that having that ability to do that really is the ingredients for having a mindset that is bigger than what is around you and the team. at any given moment. So yeah, I would say trust and safety as the prerequisite. That's the sort of the 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 lubricant for the team to work well together, and then giving people the permission and the freedom to challenge ideas, to think big. Another thing worth mentioning is sometimes there is a disconnect between an organization's policy and the ideals that they're stretching for. And so they may articulate that they want to have this big picture sort of um, um, thinking on a team, but the norms, the policies, the sort of business structures that exist don't encourage that kind of risk taking or that kind of freedom. And so there can be this disconnect between the policies that are in place in an organization and the aspirations that they have around the culture. So making sure that those two are in harmony, I think, is also key.
Well, so I think there's a lot of practical stuff that people can take from that. You can be asking yourself questions about if you are even seeing the bigger picture so that you can be intentional about taking a step back. You can work to create an environment where people can interject and pause in ways that are meant to advance the discussion, but that they feel comfortable doing that and they feel psychologically safe to do that. And I think all of that is practical. You can do that every day. You could be working in an environment where one of the biggest picture concepts you can remember is understanding the why, as you said. Like, we're all working and building careers. And is it because we want to help people and we want to solve problems? Yes, all of those things are true. But even further step back from that is these are livelihoods that we use to take care of our families and to build lives. And I think even understanding that informs how you want to communicate with your team. That informs what you want to do to provoke certain levels of investment in certain ideas and certain initiatives, right? So yeah, I mean those are big picture concepts that we can every day apply practically. Oh,
Yeah. And I'll add just one more thing to that list, Bobby, and that is to really cross pollinate ideas, have individuals work across roles and across levels, not just to gather input, but to invite new frames of reference. And so, this idea of expanding your perspective is quite literally connected to the room that you have to travel across the organization in terms of levels and across in terms of roles. And so you're trying to cross pollinate ideas that lead to more expansive thinking because an individual on one team may have a way of thinking and looking at problems and solving problems. Individuals on another team in a different function may have a different approach to how they solve problems. And that different framework can expand the way that this team is sort of looking at problems.
man, I'm not surprised. Every time we chat, I walk away with new insights that help me process the world a little bit better and interact with my colleagues a little bit better. So, Stefan, I want to thank you for joining us today. Really appreciate you taking the time and doing what you normally do, which is help me gain insight into people, which are a top priority for me. Data is my tool, but people are my focus. And I also want to thank our listeners. Hopefully, you walk away from this conversation with some insights that are helpful to you on a daily basis. If you would like to learn more about IDS or you want to subscribe, you can visit idsinc.com or you can go wherever you normally get your podcasts, right? But thank you again for joining us and giving us your time. I look forward to our next edition of IDS Talks.